we'll be factoring quadratic equations, which are trinomials here, and we're going to do this by splitting the middle. On this particular lesson, this is a harder type to factor because we're going to have an a value, a coefficient in front of the squared term that is greater than 1. In this case, it takes several extra steps. The first thing to do is multiply what we call your a value times your c value, or the first times the last. I've already done that here. 12 times negative 6 is negative 72. And then go ahead and list all the factors of 72. Since our 72 is negative, we know to multiply and get a negative, our signs are going to have to be different from each other. One positive, one negative. In this case, we need to add to get a negative 1. If I look at the list, knowing that I'm going to make one of them negative, the 8 and the 9 will add to be negative 1 if I put my negative on the 9 and leave the 8 positive. So the method called splitting the middle is just that. We take the middle term here, the negative z or minus z, and split it into the two things that add to be negative 1z, and that's positive 8z minus 9z add to be negative 1. Let's put our 12z squared in the front and our minus 6. What we'll do now is take the first two terms and we're going to factor out the GCF. That, of course, is the greatest common factor. The greatest common factor of 12z squared and 8z would, of course, be 4z. If I factor out a 4z from 12z squared, I get 3z plus, when I factor a 4z from 8z, I get 2. Now I take the next two. A little hint, whatever sign is here is going to go here every time. But you have to remember, you're factoring a negative from both of these terms. The greatest common factor here of 9z and 6 is 3. So I'll be factoring out a negative 3. So if the negative in the 3 comes out, I'll have a positive 3z. Let me erase this. Positive 3z plus 2. At this point, you can check to see if you're on the right track, because if you are, the binomials will match. 3z plus 2, 3z plus 2. If they don't match, you've done something wrong. What we'll do now is factor out the 3z plus 2, because it now is the greatest common factor of these two larger terms. So I'll be taking the 3z plus 2 and factoring out that, which will leave me then 4z minus 3. Now, if you'd like to FOIL this back together, you can see that we'll get back to our question that we started with of 12z squared minus c minus 6. So this is your answer. Let's try one more. 6r squared minus 11r minus 2. Let's multiply. List our factors. Which set of factors, remembering that they have to be different signs from each other, one positive, one negative, will give us a negative 11. You can tell the 1 and 12, if the 12 is negative and the 1 is positive. So we'll split our middle term into a positive 1r and a negative 12r. Bring down your 6r squared and your minus 2. Take the first two and factor out the GCF. In this case, it looks to be only r. So the 6r plus, when you factor out the r, you always have to leave the 1. I'm going to factor out a negative. Remember, this sign will always come there. Factor out, it looks like, whoops, I forgot my 2. Factor out a 2. That will leave me a 6r. Factoring out the negative 2, it's a negative 2 times a positive 1 that equals negative 2. Checking to make sure I'm on the right track. Since 6r plus 1 matches the 6r plus 1, I am. So I'm going to factor that out to have a final answer of 6r plus 1 times r minus 2.